For more than 30 years, Johnny Carson wasn't simply the king of late-night television. He was the man who silently judged the souls behind Hollywood's biggest and brightest smiles. Every single night, America watched the iconic stars stroll onto their stage, dazzling audiences with charm, wit, and warmth. But Carson saw far more than what played under studio lights. Behind the applause and polished laughter, he noticed who was arrogant, who was vicious, and who treated ordinary people like they were invisible. While the world worshipped these stars as untouchable legends, Carson quietly saw something uglier. To him, some of Hollywood's most beloved icons weren't admirable at all. They were deeply evil. And today, we'll show you some. So let's begin this list with number 5, Mickey Rooney. What made Johnny dislike a guest wasn't what happened on camera. It was the sinking feeling that came with knowing what they were like the moment the applause stopped. And with Mickey Rooney, that feeling never really went away. Mickey Rooney had once been Hollywood's golden child. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, he was the biggest box office attraction in America. The bright-eyed, high-energy star audiences adored in films like the Andy Hardy series. He wasn't just famous. He was woven into the mythology of old Hollywood itself. So when he appeared on The Tonight Show in the 1970s, his name still carried the fading shine of a different era. But behind that nostalgia, Rooney had built the kind of backstage reputation that made producers tense up the second his booking came through. Carson's issue with Rooney was brutally simple. He didn't believe the man had ever really grown up. By the time Rooney was making those Tonight Show appearances, he was already in his 50s and 60s. But staff said he often behaved less like a seasoned legend and more like an impulsive teenager who'd never been told no. One of the biggest concerns was alcohol. Multiple staffers claimed Rooney arrived intoxicated on more than one occasion, mumbling through stories, losing his train of thought halfway through a sentence, and drifting so badly off course that it became difficult to keep the segment together. One appearance in particular stayed with people. Rooney launched into a story about Judy Garland that quickly drifted into territory so unreal and inappropriate that Carson had no choice but to cut him off midstream and steer the conversation elsewhere on live television. After the segment, Carson was reportedly overheard asking his producer, "Is he drunk? Or is this just who he is now?" What unsettled people even more, though, was Rooney's behavior around women on set. Several production assistants reportedly hated being assigned to him because he had developed a reputation for crossing lines. Former staffers recalled the way he would hold a woman's hand a beat too long when she brought him water, pull someone in closer under the excuse of casual conversation, or make remarks that instantly changed the air in the room. And even in the 1970s, that behavior already felt ugly. Carson, and who was hardly known for playing moral referee, was still disturbed enough by it that he reportedly apologized directly to women who had been put in those situations. One director later said, "I've never seen Johnny so personally embarrassed by a guest's behavior." Eventually, Carson started making quiet adjustments. Rooney's appearances became less frequent, and when he was booked, tapings were sometimes moved earlier in the day to lower the odds of late-night drinking turning into a problem. It was Johnny's way of containing the damage while still showing some respect for Rooney's old-school star status. But even with those precautions, Rooney remained a risk. To Carson, he represented a kind of rot he couldn't stand. A man who believed fame gave him permission to behave in ways no ordinary person would ever get away with. At number 4, Frank Sinatra. Some people didn't need to raise their voice to make a room go quiet. Frank Sinatra only had to walk in. Frank Sinatra represented something darker to Johnny Carson than ego or vanity. He represented intimidation, real intimidation, the kind that changed the temperature of a room before a single word was spoken. To the public, Sinatra was the definition of effortless cool. Old blue eyes, the velvet voice, the smooth crooner with perfect timing, perfect swagger, and the kind of presence that made America fall at his feet. On The Tonight Show, He could be charming, funny, and completely magnetic. He told stories like he owned the air around him, and audiences hung on every word. But Carson saw something much less charming behind the scenes. Sinatra didn't usually arrive alone. He came with an entourage, sometimes as many as 8 men, and they weren't fellow performers or harmless assistants. Staff quietly described them as the kind of men you wouldn't want to cross in a parking lot after midnight. They spread out across the studio as they belonged there, watching the crew, saying very little, but making sure everyone felt them. One cameraman later said, "It felt like the mob had wandered onto a television set. You got the sense that if you looked at him wrong, there'd be consequences." And then there was Sinatra's temper. During one taping in the early 1970s, a floor manager gave him the routine 3-minute warning before his segment. It was standard procedure. Every guest got the same cue. Sinatra didn't take it as routine. According to multiple witnesses, he grabbed the man by the tie, yanked him close, and growled, "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran, was reportedly left rattled by the encounter. Watching it unfold on a monitor from his office, Carson nearly pulled the segment altogether. The only reason he didn't was that his producer reminded him what Sinatra meant for ratings. But Johnny never forgot what he'd seen. He despised bullies, especially men who threw their weight around at people who had no power to throw back. His patience wore thinner every time Sinatra canceled at the last minute, sometimes after already arriving at the studio, simply because he'd decided he wasn't in the mood. But the real breaking point came during a commercial break, when Sinatra made a cruel remark about a female staff member's appearance loud enough for others nearby to hear. And for once, Carson dropped the polished host routine and fired back, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." People nearby said the silence afterward was electric. Sinatra wasn't used to being challenged, especially not publicly, even in a private studio setting. After that, Carson reportedly scaled his appearances back to once a year at most. For a host who rarely interfered with bookings, that said everything. Number 3. Jerry Lewis Johnny Carson always knew when someone's charm was only for the camera. And Jerry Lewis, in his eyes, was one of the worst offenders. Jerry Lewis was one of the most recognizable entertainers in America. A comedian, actor, director, and even humanitarian, his name carried the kind of legendary weight few in Hollywood ever reached. Millions adored his slapstick chaos, his frantic energy, and, of course, his famous annual telethons that raised millions for children's health. To the public, he looked untouchable. But when Lewis stepped onto The Tonight Show, Carson saw something far less flattering. Behind the curtain, the man who built so much of his image around compassion could be astonishingly nasty to the very people helping him shine. According to multiple staff accounts, Lewis treated production crews with open disdain, snapping orders, refusing to learn names, and reducing people to "hey you" or "camera guy," as if basic respect was beneath him. And worse still, he didn't reserve that behavior for assistants and stagehands. He pushed his luck with Carson himself. During one especially uncomfortable appearance, Lewis repeatedly cut Johnny off, steamrolling questions and pulling attention away from everyone else on stage. At one point, he even reached over and adjusted Carson's tie without being invited, a move that visibly irritated the famously controlled host. That may sound small, but inside that studio, it meant something. Everyone on staff knew the rule. You did not touch Johnny Carson unless Johnny Carson made it clear you could. Lewis knew it too. Some insiders believed he did it on purpose, a small act of dominance disguised as playfulness. But more than anything, what disgusted Carson was the contradiction. He'd watch Lewis break down on national television during those emotional telethons, presenting himself as a saint for suffering children, then see a completely different man once the cameras stopped rolling. Staffers described him as demeaning, dismissive, and openly hostile to anyone who couldn't elevate his career. Carson reportedly told a colleague after one appearance, "He's what happens when ego outruns talent." Eventually, Johnny had had enough. After one especially tense run-in in the early 1980s, Carson made the rare decision to quietly shut the door on Lewis for good. That almost never happened. Johnny put up with plenty of difficult people if they brought ratings, but Lewis crossed a line he couldn't ignore. And in later private conversations, Carson didn't soften his opinion. In a town overflowing with vanity and frauds, he believed Jerry stood out as something worse, a man whose public kindness masked a deeply unpleasant core. Number 2. Joan Crawford. Some stars were difficult, some were vain, but Joan Crawford left behind something colder than either one. She left a chill. Joan Crawford was the embodiment of old Hollywood glamour. Perfect hair, perfect posture, perfect lighting, if she could help it. When she sat down on Johnny Carson's couch in 1970, audiences saw exactly what they expected to see: grace, poise, and the polished elegance of a woman who looked born to be photographed. She was, to millions, the very definition of what a movie star should be. But it didn't take Carson long to realize that beneath the lacquered image was someone far more unsettling. Even before Crawford arrived at the studio, the mood had already shifted. She sent over a 4-page memo outlining her demands in obsessive detail, everything from the exact angle of her chair to the temperature of the room, which reportedly had to be exactly 67 degrees. Not 66, not 68, 67. She also insisted on bringing her own makeup team and brushing off The Tonight Show's award-winning artists as if they were beneath her standards. That alone was enough to make staff groan. But once she was inside the building, the polished image started cracking. According to multiple people who worked that day, Crawford had a very specific way of treating people. If you had status, she could be sweet, flattering, even radiant. But if you were young, lower on the ladder, or in her way, the mask slipped fast. One moment in particular stayed with people for years. A young production assistant, barely 20, accidentally entered Crawford's dressing room carrying a tray of water at the wrong moment. What followed, according to witnesses, was brutal. Crawford reportedly unloaded on the girl with a tirade so vicious that people in the hallway froze where they stood. She called her names, mocked her intelligence, and sneered that maybe she'd be better suited for work in a brothel where incompetence might at least be useful. The assistant fled in tears. Crawford then demanded she be fired. Carson's producer refused, but the damage was already done. What unsettled Johnny most wasn't just the cruelty itself. It was how instantly Crawford could bury it. During commercial breaks, she reportedly sat in stony silence, cold and unreadable, like someone carved out of marble. Then the red light came on, and suddenly she transformed into the perfect guest, laughing, glowing, warm, charming, every word sounding effortless, every smile looking sincere. That performance disturbed Carson more than almost anything else. He tried, at least outwardly, to connect with her. But afterward, he reportedly told Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." It was one of the coldest things he ever said about a guest, and for Johnny Carson, that meant something. Years later, when Christina Crawford published Mommy Dearest, exposing the alleged abuse she experienced at home, Carson reportedly wasn't surprised in the slightest. According to friends, he simply nodded and said, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." To Carson, Joan Crawford represented Hollywood's darkest trick of all, the ability to make cruelty look elegant. She was living proof that the most polished people in the room could sometimes be the most merciless once the cameras went dark. All right, now, let's end this with number 1. Bette Davis. If Mickey Rooney left Johnny Carson embarrassed, Bette left him flat-out furious. Now, Bette wasn't just another aging star making the late-night rounds. She was Hollywood royalty. With that unmistakable voice, a stare that could cut through steel, and 2 Academy Awards to her name, Davis had earned her place among the most formidable actresses of her era. By the time she sat down on The Tonight Show, she was already a living monument to old Hollywood, and audiences loved hearing her tell stories from that vanished world in her fierce, unforgettable style. On camera, she could still be magnetic, funny, sharp, and completely commanding. But off camera, Carson found her almost unbearable. Crew members remembered Davis as combative, acid-tongued, and nearly impossible to satisfy. She didn't just toss off clever one-liners. She had a habit of cutting people to pieces. And when she was booked alongside other guests, especially younger actors or other women, the atmosphere often shifted immediately. Davis would interrupt, hijack the rhythm of the conversation, and in some cases, physically angle herself away from the others as if they weren't even worthy of acknowledgement. One talent coordinator later recalled, "If someone else started getting the laughs, you could see it all over her face. She was already figuring out how to take the room back." And it didn't stop there. According to multiple staff accounts, Davis could be just as vicious with the people working behind the scenes. She reportedly insisted on having whiskey in her dressing room before tapings, and when she'd been drinking, her remarks grew even nastier. Makeup artists and cue card staff later remembered her firing off insults that could be sexist, cruel, and at times openly racist without the slightest hesitation. One makeup artist recalled Davis refusing to let her touch up her face, sneering, "Find me someone whose hands don't shake like a drunk." That kind of behavior hit a nerve with Carson in a way few guests ever managed to. Johnny hated confrontation. He avoided it whenever he could. But Davis pushed him to the point where even he stepped in. During one rehearsal, after she reportedly tore into a cue card holder for not moving quickly enough, Carson finally intervened. Quietly, but with unmistakable steel, he told her, "Miss Davis, on this show, we speak to everyone with respect, or we don't speak at all." According to people there, she was visibly stunned. She wasn't used to being checked, and for once, she backed off. But Carson never forgot it. And he respected Davis's extraordinary talent, but he also believed talent did not buy you the right to humiliate people. And after her final appearance in the early 1980s, he reportedly told his producer, "That's the last time. Life's too short to be verbally flogged by Bette Davis, no matter how many Oscars she has." Well, if you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe for more stories like this. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you very soon.